Grad school is a lot of work and super expensive. So today I am discussing the most asked question: how much do PhD students make? And today I'm not only talking about salaries of PhD students, I'm showing my literal actual pay stubs for the first few years of my PhD. So make sure you stay till the end. There are three main ways in which grad students make money or have an income for their graduate education. The first and most common one that we all know are grants and fellowships. The second would be stipends, and then the third would be working or holding a job. Now in today's video, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail into grants and fellowships, and that's mostly because there's not like a standard of grants and fellowships. Every grant and every fellowship have their own specific expectations, payout schedules, rules and regulations, and amounts, and it's just impossible for me to talk about how much a graduate student will make off of a grant or a fellowship if I don't know your individual circumstances. But if you are somebody who is interested in knowing how to find grants and fellowships, how to apply to grants and fellowships, and just more about them more generally, I would highly suggest that you watch or head to my grad funding playlist, which will be linked at the end screen of this video. Now let's talk about stipends. Stipends, unlike grants or working as a graduate student, are just monies that you get for being a graduate student. Stipends can be as little as $100 to as much as $30,000, but they are extremely dependent on your department or university's financial capability. Now, oftentimes you don't really have many requirements to maintain your stipend other than being a full-time graduate student and staying in good academic standing. But again, what's most important about stipends, or to see that they're different than grants and working, is that you're getting money for just existing and doing your research. And stipends, more times than not, are often monies that you receive either during the application process or at the beginning of every year. They are not necessarily something you apply for, but again, rather something that is distributed to you from your department or your university to help you have money throughout the year. Now, if you're somebody who's heard somebody say, grad school is free, PhDs never pay for school, then I have some bad news for you, because that's not actually reflective of a lot of graduate students' experiences. And if you're somebody who thinks you're just going to get a stipend because you're a PhD student, then I suggest you watch my Truth About Grad Funding video, which will really break down what it's actually like to be a graduate student and how funding works, and what does it really mean to be fully funded. And that video will also be at the end screen and within my grad funding playlist. So make sure you head to those next. The next way in which PhDs make money is working. And working is actually great because unlike stipends or fellowships or grants, they're pretty consistent and they're income that you can depend on more times than not to always be there. And that's why today, this is where we're really going to look at the salaries, or how much PhD students make as a graduate student, because it's the easiest to predict and to make sure you're getting information to help you prepare for your financial stability as a graduate student. Now, there are a variety of different jobs that you can have as a PhD student. You could be a TA, a GSR, a reader, a tutor. And these jobs, at UCLA at least, are called academic student employee positions. You can also work in a variety of different places on campus, like food services, special programmings. You can work as an assistant or support certain departments or programs at your university, and you would just go through a traditional application process for those. Once you advance to candidacy or become ABD as a graduate student, even more opportunities open up where you can continue to teach and work and do all those other jobs, but then you have the opportunity to lecture, adjunct, work at community colleges or in other universities. And so the doors open up much wider the longer you're in your graduate program and the more credentials you receive, which is good news, because that means as a graduate student, you have a ton of options on ways to fund your graduate program through working. Now, generally, I will say most graduate students, PhDs specifically, work as academic student employees and serve either as TAs or as GSRs. Now, I do have videos about GSRships and TAs, their responsibilities, expectations, how to apply, what to expect. So definitely make sure that you head to my grad funding playlist, because they're gonna be in there and they're gonna help you out. But now it's time to look at just how much these positions get paid and what you can expect as a graduate student worker at your university. And we're gonna look at GSRs first. Now, as you see, even within this one position, there are a lot of varieties within salaries. In fact, there are 10 different pay scales just for GSRs. And as you can imagine, each one of these different points of the pay scale are going to be dependent on your own eligibility or level of experience within this position or within this research process. And I can say generally, especially at UCLA, if you are a first or second year, you're probably going to be between the 1 and the 3 mark. And as you get higher, maybe get your master's or advance a candidacy, that's when you'll move up to the 3, the 4, and the 5. Now in theory, because there are higher levels than a 5, with more experience, you should be able to move up the rankings. I've never personally met anybody or experienced moving past a 5, and I know that's determined by each department or program, so it may look different from field to field. But generally, this is kind of what you can expect as a GSR at UCLA, and see the range. This is also helpful if you're somebody who is planning on attending a UC, because generally our payments are pretty comparable. We get paid about the same amount, so that can also help you plan or see what to expect within this field or within this school system more specifically. Now we're going to look at TA-ships, or the salaries of TAs. And as you can see, there are a lot less variation, but still some different pay scales, 3 to be exact. Something else you should probably notice, or you might have noticed, is that TA-ships at the same level of experience have a little bit more money in their salary. And that's because just the type of work you're doing as a TA is generally more than what you may be expected to do as a GSR. And that's because you're holding section, you may be teaching and grading, speaking with students, and on and on and on. And so this is their way of compensating you for the extra labor that you would be doing as a TA in relation to a GSR. So generally, if you're really interested in trying to make more money, especially in the UC system, a TA-ship definitely is going to give you more money with no matter what level you are at. Now, I bet you're probably wondering, what were those percentages that were presented with the salaries? And these are actually the most important part of these payments. And that's because the numbers that you see here on the screen aren't actually the numbers that you're going to get paid as a graduate student. Because 100% and 50% are appointments. And that means that is how much time that you would be expected to work to get compensated or to get that compensation. So if you're working 100%, that means you are working full-time at 40 hours a week. If you're working 50%, that means you're working part-time at 20 hours a week. Now, almost no graduate student that I know at least has ever worked or been granted access to work 100%. It is more common for you to work 50% of the time, but it's even more common for you to work 25%, which would just be 10 hours a week. And so your compensation would also be 25% of the 100% compensation salary. So if we're looking back at TA-ships and you are a first-year graduate student working only 25%, then you would make $1,291 a month, which is not enough to live in Los Angeles. And even the $2,583 that you would make at 50% really isn't that much. So how do graduate students survive if this is how much they're being paid? Well, you do your best to mix and match opportunities to change how you're living or your living expectations to make things work. So my first year, I worked 2 jobs at 75%, so that's 30 hours a week. I was a TA for the entire year, and I also served an hourly position in the financial wellness department at UCLA, which paid me about $17 an hour. Not to mention, outside of UCLA, I made sure that I had a roommate so I can afford rent. And so if we're looking at my pay stub for my very first year, I made $2,688, which isn't a lot, but with those 2 jobs, it was enough for me to cover my rent, find food, gas, and all of those other necessities of life. The next year, I also petitioned to work 75%, but this time I was able to get 2 salaried positions. So I served as a TA and a GSR, which helped me make a little bit more money. And as we see in my second year, I was able to make $2,847, which is a slight increase already from the year before. more. And again, at this point, I was making just enough money to start to live on my own and to pay my own rent and keep up with all of my own personal things and not have a roommate. In my third year, I again petitioned to work 75%. I don't know if we're catching a pattern, but I've been working quite a lot. But this year, I was able to score 2 TA shifts for the entire year. And as you can see from this pay stub, I was consistently getting $3,587 a month. And whew, that made a world of difference for me living in LA, trying to make things work, and also continuing my graduate school process. And now in my 4th year, because I advanced to candidacy, and then I also have a long-term or a consistent position with the Center for the Advancement of Teaching as an inclusive teaching fellow, and then I've also worked as a TA, I have been able to make a little bit under $300 more than I did last year. And I will say across all of my years in grad school, I have been able to maintain a comfortable lifestyle. There has been very difficult times, tight times, especially when I'm wanting or needing to do research or conferences or do field work like I am now, not to mention feeling overworked, burnt out, disrespected, underappreciated by my department or by those around me. And that's why I'm always preaching on this channel to make sure you are prepared financially for graduate school and that you are constantly applying for fellowship grants and other external resources to make sure your graduate process runs as smooth as possible. So again, I know I said it a lot. There's a lot of information in my grad funding playlist, which you should go to right now to make sure you know as much as you can so you can be as prepared as you can. If you found at least 2 things useful in this video, please hit the thumbs up. It helps share this video with others who need it, but it also helps support my channel and continue to grow. So I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.